thanks for being like open and willing to have a conversation and just talk. And like I said before, like my intention is to just like, you know, make it more, I guess, normalized to talk about the raw and the real of motherhood. We do it a lot in Wild Mama in the program, but being able to do it a little bit more openly so that other mamas can benefit and realize that they're not alone in, many of the struggles, but also they're not alone in dreaming and in wanting more and, trying to create the life that they want. And I feel like I know that you're really committed to that. Like we all have our journey, but like, since doing the program and meeting you through that, I feel like you've always been really like dedicated to the process and like really trying to figure it out and like being honest about who you are and what you want. And like I just feel like it's really admirable, and I know it's not easy, but like I feel like you continue to really show up, and so that's why I wanted to have this conversation with you, to just be able to like engage more and like uncover a little bit more about what your process has been like and what your journey has been like, so that so that other mamas can benefit, because I think you've learned a lot and you have a lot of insight, and every time I talk to you, I have like really great things to say. So I'm like, yeah, let's hear your voice. So I guess I wanted to start just by like, you kind of sharing a little bit more about who you are. So maybe you can like just share like how many kids you have, how old they are, if you want to share your location, favorite hobby or ice cream, or like things you like. um and kind of maybe also end with like your kind of what you feel like your intention is for your like life right now, like where you kind of are, and what your kind of intentions and focus is right now in your life, and then we'll get into more questions.
All right. Well, yay for your first podcast. I'm excited for you. I'm Kimberly Sama.
Yeah.
Citizen of the world, but currently located in San Antonio, Texas. I have one 10-year-old, which means I've been a mom for a decade.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. Yeah, that's a mom for a decade. He was born in Burkina, but we moved back to San Antonio when he was just under 1 year old.
And where's Burkina?
Burkina Faso is in West Africa, just above Ghana, next to Niger, underneath Mali. Yeah, and all the questions. Let me see. Favorite ice cream? All the ice creams. Hobbies, I think I'm constantly trying new things. So currently challenging myself with improv comedy, which is
That's
a
so
challenge.
cool.
But I like yoga. I like nature. I like most things. I really love to travel. I think that's when I'm most in touch with my wild mama spirit.
Yeah.
And I think my intention currently is I'm really focusing on just being and letting that be enough, rather than like what I do or what people perceive my status to be, or like I'm really working on the being, which can also be a challenge.
Yeah, for sure. Like what kind of brought you into that piece of like trying to just be?
I think I think I'm very much like a workaholic. Like if I have a mission, or like I'm all in on it, and I think a lot of that, if I'm not careful, can be a lot of doing. But if I'm not bringing the essence of who I am along with me and like experiencing it, I think sometimes you can do more harm. Like you mean to do well and you do a lot of harm because you're not actually being a part of the experience so much as moving through the things you think you're supposed to do, or the things that are on the list to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just trying to be more aware and more reflective, and I tend to disconnect like mind and body. So I'm trying to be in my body and like
Mm.
really feeling and connecting to moments. So I think that's what landed me in improv as well. So clearly my current challenge to overcome.
Yeah. Yeah. And like with the sort of you had talked about kind of like harm, like it can do more harm than good. Is that harm to you or harm to others? Like what has
Mhm.
that looked like?
I mean, I think it could be all of it, right? Like when I think about being a mom, like trying to be a good mom, which who decides, like
Mm,
has led me to live outside of alignment with myself. And then I think
mm,
not have the same impact that I maybe had hoped, like if I do all these things, but if none of those things are really true to who I am, then I'm
mm.
not really showing up in relationship. In the absence of relationship, I think hurts me, but also hurts my son because it's
Yeah.
disconnecting rather than connecting.
Mm. And that was one of the things that, like, when we had talked before, you said that, that's something that you're really learning in your motherhood journey right now is like, there's no right way or one way to do it. And so I'd love to hear you talk a little bit more about that because I feel like it's kind of related to what you're talking about with the being. It's like, how can you just be the mother that you are to the son that you have rather than feel like you need to do motherhood in a
Mhm.
particular kind of way. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about kind of your journey to coming into that realization of motherhood and not having to be just one way.
Yeah. I think yeah, I don't know. I think one of the things I realized a lot like in the wild mama cohort was
Mm,
that I I think can adapt so much to environments that I didn't ever really take the time to figure out, like absent the environments, who am I? Like what
mm,
makes me me? And I
mm,
remember you talking to me about like seed of the soul work and kind of thinking about like I've lived all these lives and they're all maybe versions or pieces of me, but like I'm very chameleon-esque. And so when you think of like a chameleon changes to its environment, but who's the chameleon if there's no like backdrop that it has to blend into?
yeah, that's so deep.
Um,
Wow. Yeah. Sorry, I can ask more, but I don't want to cut you off.
no, but I think so like when it comes to I mean, being a mom is a weird thing, right? Like, because I don't think anyone, and I'm a single mom, so I'll add that
Mm,
in. I think that's probably a little bit different of a dynamic too. So in my adult life, haven't spent a decade with anyone other than
mm.
him. And so I think he knows me in ways that I don't know, like sometimes they'll say something, you're like, oh wow, you're noticing me.
Yeah, yeah, like the
Um,
essence of you.
and he can also negotiate and like he also knows the right moment to like I'm gonna ask her now, I'll get a yes or a no. um but I think what it's also brought up too is like my need to adapt and like fit in.
Mm,
I apply that to him too, and I'm having to learn to step back and see like who he is and how he negotiates and navigates the world is
mm,
very different than how I negotiate and
mm,
navigate I mean we're polar opposite people. Um, and so I think part of figuring out who I am is also making it okay for him to be who he is and like
mm,
having to learn to navigate like how do you grow a healthy connected human who is
mm.
also wholly himself but like pull him back when he needs some pulling back. And so it's a
Yeah.
little bit of a dance because I think sometimes
Mm,
I'm quick to jump in and learning how to let him be and figure it out. And I think part of that has been learning how to let me be and figuring it out, because I think I pull myself in pretty quick.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so interesting because I do feel like the more that we can allow ourselves to be who we are, it's similar to healing. Like the more we heal, the more we're able to let other
Mm,
people kind of heal, the more that we show ourselves grace and forgiveness, the more we're able to extend that to others. So it feels similar, like the more you come into your own essence and know who you are and what you bring to the table, the more that you can allow your son to be who he is, and I don't have to manipulate myself to be in my environment, so I don't need to manipulate him to fit into his environment. Like,
mhm.
no, we could just actually just be free. We could just be happy, we can just be kind of at peace and be at ease, like in our own
Yeah.
skin. And so like, do you feel like at this stage in your life that you feel like more at ease in your own skin?
I think I'm getting there, but I also think I feel more at ease not being at ease, like,
Mm,
which I think might be part of the journey, right? Like, and I'm able to like, "Oh, this
damn.
feels really uncomfortable, and I'm gonna keep showing up for it."
Yeah. So when you say like I'm more at ease at not being at ease, that brings up two things for me. Like, is it because like what you just said right now is like you're kind of comfortable being uncomfortable. But what I thought of initially was how some folks normalize like not being aligned or normalize like not being, them fully themselves. So it's like I feel more comfortable not being who I am in some ways than I do being myself because that's so new. But you're talking more about like you've somehow become really comfortable with being uncomfortable and being in uncomfortable new situations. Is that right?
Yeah, like, I'll use improv as an example because that's been my, like, uh it's not work related, it's not parenting related. Um,
Mm,
I maybe am not terrible at it is where I'm at with it right now, but like I feel deeply uncomfortable doing it because it's all
mm,
about you bringing whatever you have to the stage, to the like, and it's also very playful. Like, it's, I think I've forgotten how to play, like,
yeah.
and so I think it's sometimes if I want something or I like something, I'll like hold it in because I feel like I'm not good at it, like whatever the thing is. And so
Mm,
this, like, still feel like I'm not that great at it. Don't really know always how to connect in social situations that aren't like around,
mm,
like, here's what, work or, something that's really like organized. And so
mm,
I keep going and I'm evolving in the process of it. And it still feels really uncomfortable, but I'm
mm,
not like I didn't quit, right? Like I didn't just, oh, that's
yeah.
hard, so I'm not gonna do it.
Yeah. And what got you to the point where you now feel a little bit more comfortable being uncomfortable? Because like a few years ago when I met you, and we talked about this before too, like, we're not sure that improv really would have been a thing, you know, a few years ago. So like you have been on a journey of feeling
Yeah.
uncomfortable. And like when I met you, you were sort of becoming, comfortable with being uncomfortable with the healing process and with like kind of the reflecting at and looking at yourself and like, wanting to come more into who you truly are and your voice. So like what has happened like along this journey that has gotten you to the point where you feel like, you are able to kind of step into that discomfort versus maybe running away or coping in other ways or like avoiding it altogether? Like, what are some things that have helped you kind of navigate up to a point where like, yeah, I feel uncomfortable, but I know I'm not going to die. I know I'm not going to like, fully, panic. Like I can actually, keep showing up and kind of like, what's the why behind showing up for improv and like in the discomfort? Like, is it growth? Like, what's the motivation?
Honestly, I think the catalyst has been like failing at things that I wanted. So I say
Mm,
that like anytime I have to like interview for something, I have been in the past a terrible interviewee.
mm,
And I think it's for two reasons. One, I walk in feeling like I have to prove like I belong rather than like walking in believing I belong.
mm,
Whether or
mm,
not like I get picked or not, like I've already ruled myself out before I showed up, which
mm.
seems like a real disservice if like I'm the only me, so I should be all in my corner, but I tend to show up like already counting myself out, like feeling a need to prove myself.
Mm,
And then two, I think I haven't like I don't like share what really like the vulnerability of like,
mm,
here's why I think I'm a great fit, or here's why like I keep it close to my chest, and like if you don't share with someone, someone's never gonna know. And then
oh,
they
yeah.
can choose whether or not like you're the right fit. But if you're counting yourself out, and I think I was doing it so often and then realizing like it was a terrible interview. Like if I interviewed me, I wouldn't have given it to me either. And I didn't
Mm,
display any of the qualities, and I didn't walk in feeling
mm,
like I belong.
mm,
And I think improv was an impulsive, like I went to a team training at work and they're like, we have classes. And I was like, I'm signing up. And then I was like, oh shit, what did I do? But I remember in our very first group or class, the teacher made a comment around like everyone belongs on the stage. And I think
Mm,
that has stuck with me. Like even when you fall completely flat on your face, like better to be on the stage and fail than
mm.
to never even put yourself up there at
Yeah.
all. And so I think those are the like I kept falling,
Mm,
and it felt like if I'm gonna fall, I should at least really try, if that makes
mm,
sense. And
yeah.
I think it's the same, like, I don't tell people when I'm like, or in the past I haven't. I've started doing it now. It's like, well, I'm not going to tell anyone, because then if it doesn't work, I don't have to tell anyone it didn't work. But then it
Mm,
didn't give people in my life a chance to support me,
support.
celebrate
Yeah.
with me if I get it, be there for
Yeah.
me. You know what I mean? Like it's like I took away any opportunity to be closer to people because I'm like holding
Mm,
it so close to chest that even if it had happened, like there's no one to be like, yay, you really wanted it. Or
yeah. To
gosh, that
celebrate
sucks. You
you.
really wanted it.
Yeah. Yeah. What that reminds me of is like a couple of years ago when I got stung by 2 jellyfish in 8 days, and I was like, "What the hell?" Yeah, like, I hadn't and on 2 different sides of the island, like, I had never gotten stung before in my life, but then I all of a sudden get stung twice in 8 days, so, I'm a big proponent of, like, alright, the universe communicates in ways and is trying to sort of, like, shake me up, and I was, like, asking myself, like, "Why did this happen? Like, what was this about?" And just based on some of the things that like were coming up in my life, I realized that like part of the lesson and was that I was trying to like avoid um pain in my life, and in trying to avoid pain I was also kind of blocking joy and happiness.
Mm,
And the way that that lesson came out was like a few years before I got stung. I had met this Hawaiian uncle, and he had pointed out this plant, and he said, if you ever get stung, use this plant. It will help you, like it will, like, you just put it on your skin and then the pain, the stinging will go
mm,
away. And so after I got out of the water, with my first thing, I was like just a beach over from where that beach was with the medicine. So I like ran over, I got the medicine, I put it on, and it felt so much better, like immediately. And the whole thing just helped me realize like it's not about never getting stung. It's not about like never getting hurt. It's about when you do get hurt, you use the medicine, right? Like you
mm,
go and you find the medicine and you apply it. A lot of times we have the medicine, but we don't use it. And instead we're just trying to avoid heartbreak. We're just trying to avoid embarrassment. We're just trying to avoid pain. We're just trying to avoid the failure. Like I don't want to feel those things, but I've learned and am still learning that life is about that full experience, and that we have the medicine so that we can live, because it's inevitable that we'll experience fear. It's inevitable that we'll experience failure. It's inevitable that we'll experience pain and heartbreak and hurt and all of those things. But when you allow the fullness of that experience, and you also are allowing joy, pleasure, play, expansiveness, excitement, like all of these things get to come in. And I think people don't often recognize that when you block the pain or the hurt or whatever these, hard feelings are, you also block joy. You also block pleasure and growth, right? Because you stump yourself. You can't have one without the other. You can't have only joy all the time and never have hard emotions and feelings. Like, that's not being a human being. So it feels like you have come into that place of allowing yourself to, like, okay, well, yeah, like I can't necessarily avoid, that sometimes I won't get the job, or sometimes I might feel like I'm falling on my face or whatever, but it's better to do it with support and love and joy and celebration and someone holding and supporting me when I do feel down, than to just not do it at all, or do it and not say anything, and then I feel like alone. It feels like you are more like embracing the fullness of life, like in your own journey. Is that true? Like, do you feel
Yeah,
like
I'm trying to swim with the jellyfish.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, because I could have easily been like, oh fuck, I'm not going in the ocean anymore. Like, that is scary. I'm not doing that. Like, I'm gonna avoid it altogether. But it's like, but then I can't play. Then I can't enjoy the joy of the ocean. Like, the ocean is scary. Like, there's a lot that the ocean can do to me, and I could do nothing, but there's also so much like playfulness when I can go into the ocean. It's my medicine. I go every morning, and it brings me so much calm, and helps me feel good inside myself and in my body. And so it's like, yeah, I feel like, it's, we can easily become like jaded with life. And when we fail, when, like you said, when you feel like you're not getting what you want, like you're trying but you're like failing at getting what you want, it's like, yeah, you could just be like, well then fuck it, I'm not going to get anything, I'm just going to stop. Or you can be like, no, I'm figuring this out, and I'm just going to embrace the discomfort because I really want what I want. I really want to grow. I really want to realize myself. um so what do you feel like is like core to your motivation, like as a person? Is it realizing your potential? Is it realizing like the more like fullest version of you? Like, because you were talking about earlier, like just like, the chameleon, and like, who is the chameleon outside of, adapting to all of these environments? Like, is that like part of your motivation, like figuring out your essence and like kind of who is the real Kim?
I think when we did our wild mama master plan,
Mhm.
I think a lot of the pieces that I started with that are really still true. And I
Mm,
think the biggest realization that I've had is, like, I think I've always had like a transform the world kind of motivation. And
mm,
I think my biggest lesson has been, oh, the inner world, like if I can just transform myself,
mm,
that's gonna do more than anything else could do. And so I think that's even like the
mm.
being instead of doing, right? Like,
Yeah.
I realized that if I can be the best version of me, then whatever I show up to or show up in is
Mm,
going to benefit from that. And so,
yeah.
I think I spent a lot of time, I don't know, like there's beauty in it, but like also like running away from myself, right? Like I
Mm,
moved a lot. I grew up moving. Like I think I am learning now how, a friend of mine said it and I've adopted it, like be rooted with wings. Like I think I was very untethered, and now I'm learning how to root, but I still, like, my soul's on fire when I'm out in the world and I'm experiencing people
yeah.
and places. And so I'm learning that it doesn't have to be polarized, right? Like both can happen
Yeah.
at the same time.
Oh
And I
yeah.
think even just you talking about the water, like one of the
Mm,
things, like in getting to know you and being on this journey together, is your
mm.
journey to the water was a long one, right? Like it doesn't have to
Yes.
happen overnight. And I think
Yeah.
part of like not being able to sit with pain for me is like, well, I'll go somewhere else. And now it's learning like all of that got me, like everything I've done, right choices, wrong choices, like all have gotten me to where I am now. And I'm
Yeah.
continuing, like it's continues, and who knows, 5 years from now where I'll be is different from where I am now. But
Yeah.
recognizing like the journey, like it's all cheesy stuff, but like it really
Yeah,
is about the journey, and you
it
don't get to
is.
an endpoint, because as soon as you like, when I had an amazing coach who would talk about like the stage of enlightenment, and as soon as you get there,
Mm,
it's like then you fall into the depths of darkness again, and like it's almost
mm,
like a spiral. Like
yes.
you get to one point and you're like, I know now, and then you're like, oh,
Yeah.
how much I don't know, like next.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is, so much of why, like in Wild Mama and just in our, framework, it's all about aligning to the seasons, because I feel like it's hard to embrace the journey when you have, this Western society and like patriarchy saying it's a linear path. Like you have to get somewhere. There's like a place to be. And unless you get there, you fail. Like you're a failure. You're not good enough. You're not worthy. So it's like we have to sort of adopt a different orientation in our whole being and in our whole life in order, I feel like, to embrace the journey, because otherwise, at least for me, like constantly trying to get somewhere, constantly trying to like show I'm worthy, constantly, like you were saying, show that I belong, like, it's like the more I focus on that, I felt like the more I was like getting away from myself and feeling just constantly shitty, honestly, like never able to reach the standards or the expectation, because my life is so non-traditional. My life
Mm,
is nothing about my journey is linear, and it feels like, you know, we're similar in that sense. Like nothing about our journey has been like the standard, white picket fence, you do this, you do that, and then you end up here. Like we've been all around and up and down, like, on this thing. So like the reason why I love aligning to the seasons and the rhythms and cycles of nature is like grandmother earth, that's how she rolls. She rolls in this cycle and in these seasons, and there's time for death, there's time for life, there's time for birth, there's time for death again, and then life. And it just creates more space for us to be,
mhm,
rather than just do. Like I'm realizing that life is about the living. It's about being present. It's about learning and it's about growth. But so much of our society has pushed that life is about accomplishing, life is about producing, life is about showing how much you're worth, life is about like showing how much you can sacrifice yourself, to show that, like you're down for the cause, you're a great mother, you're a great
mhm,
worker, you're a great, partner, whatever. Um, but that's not sustainable. It doesn't allow us to, I think, even feel the feelings, like the fullness of the feelings. If I'm always trying to get somewhere, if I'm always trying to fit in, if I'm always trying to adapt to other people, when do I actually have time to like slow down and feel what I'm feeling and to be present and to be? You don't have that time. And I think that's why often mamas struggle with guilt so much, right? Like we feel guilty for being, because society says, well, no, you got to be going, you got to be doing if you want to feel valuable. So I feel like you coming into like the just embracing the journey, I feel like that requires a different orientation to life and to living. And I feel like you really did kind of like resonate a lot with the idea of aligning to the seasons and the cycles. So like, yeah, do you feel like that has helped you kind of embrace the journey? Just seeing life a little bit outside of kind of like our Western way of operating.
Yeah, I love the season orientation. I think for a couple of reasons. One, everyone's seasons don't have to be the same, I think was a
Yeah.
real lesson. And so,
Mm,
uh, and I think two, the thing with Wild Mama that I found pretty transformative was just how vulnerable
mm.
everyone was, and like realized like, oh, none of us have it all together. Like that's
Yeah.
reassuring. Like we're all walking around like we've got this, but on the inside, all grappling with very similar
Yeah.
and different, you know, like that.
Yeah.
And so I think one is
Mm.
it's helpful to like, oh, I'm in winter right now. Like things just need to die and death is painful
Yes.
and I'm grieving and, I
Yeah.
need this because then there's going to be a spring, right? Like then there's going to be life that comes forth, but it's
Yeah.
just the time for this. And
Mm.
it also helps when you're looking around and like maybe other people aren't in winter. And so that's great. Like I want to celebrate where they are. And it's
Yeah.
also okay for me not to be there. Like I think it was
Yeah.
helpful both internally and then also like not having this expectation that we all be in the same season at the same time.
Yeah. Which again is like so much about how our culture works, that like homogenous, like everyone's the same, everybody look the same, do the same, we're all on the same path. It's like, no, man. I have my own rhythms. Like I can't be doing what you're doing and giving yourself that permission to be where you are. Amazing. One of the things we had talked about before that I really wanted to like dig into and understand a little bit more was this process of kind of like finding your voice. And it's similar to what you were talking about with improv and, your essence and whatnot. But just like since I've been working with you and like, witnessing your journey over the last years, like you have really, really come more into your voice. Like you've really come into more like being able to express yourself, like literally with your voice, but also just like now with doing improv and I know that you have really asserted yourself in your workplace. So I would love to hear a little bit more about your journey of like coming into your voice and like using your voice and maybe like if you can share a little bit of like where you used to be and like, kind of how challenging it has been for you to like use your voice and then what has helped you come into more of really speaking out and, practicing using your voice.
Yeah, I think I recognize that I've been extremely blessed to have um a lot of amazing like teachers and mentors
Mm,
and guides and friends on my journey. So I think
mm,
um when I think about the journey, like it's a lifelong journey, right? Like, and I'm further now than I've been, and I still have so many things to like
mm,
continue to work on and to continue to grow in. And so in some ways I've come into my voice a ton, and in some ways I'm still barely scratching the surface.
yeah.
Um, but I know in my core that what's the biggest gift I've had on the journey is the people,
Mm.
whether they be like people I actually know, books. Someone called that, I don't even know who it was. Somebody called them wisdom texts. And I was like, oh,
Oh,
yes,
I like
those have
that.
been helpful.
Huh.
But being able to connect with like learning and people sharing their experiences with me. And
Mm,
um, I think that's been the most profound thing. And I'd say the biggest shift I've had more recently is realizing like, oh, I do know some things and I do have an essence and
mm,
I have things that are particular to how I see the world, and they're continuing to shift and change, but like there's a core to me that I am coming to realize is the core of me and like
mm,
the
mm,
unchanging part, right? And,
mm, 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 mm,
um, I think for a long time it was like, who do I need to be like, or how, like, what's the example of who I'm trying to be. And I think now
Mm,
realizing like, oh, there's no one else like me. And so
mm,
I probably am better served trying to be like myself.
yeah.
Um, and then
Mm.
I think again, like for me, it's, and like on the Enneagram, I'm a 7. So I'm like all about no pain. And so part of, I think, being more like me is realizing some people aren't going to like me, and that's
Yeah.
okay.
Mm,
And like, that's, I think, part of the not adapting in situations that feel misaligned, because I think for me, it's been a journey to come back home to
mm,
myself. And even if that means like someone doesn't like it or disapproves of it, like,
mm.
wouldn't it be better that I approve of it, because I'm the
Yeah.
only one who's gonna have to like live in and move through life
Yeah.
with me.
Yeah. And have you always struggled with kind of using your voice, or was there like a time when it shifted and you kind of feel like you lost a bit of your voice? Like, what has that journey been like? Is it just, you know, that's
Mm,
sort of been a dominant part of your life, or did it shift into that for a while?
I don't know. I think it's hard. I have a hard time like remembering things, because I don't know, like, when you remember, like, how I remember things changes
Mm,
as you live, right? Like, I hung out
totally.
with a friend from college this past week, and we were talking about different things, and I'm like, is that really, that's not how I don't think that's how it happened. Is that, are you sure?
Yeah, yeah,
Like we don't remember everything the same way, because I
totally.
think
You have a
what
new
comes after
lens.
changes what came before. But I
Yeah.
think just throughout my life, I've always felt like an outsider, or
Mm,
like, yeah, I think I think that's probably been a big part of it. And I think over
mm,
time, like, my technique was like, well, I'll just adapt to what's happening. And I think I'm
mm,
generally a peacekeeper, like, um, and so I think that became another friend. All these people who teach me things. Another friend's in a course, and she talks about like winning strategy. Like, I guess my winning strategy was adapting, and
yeah. Mm,
adapting can be great. It's an amazing skill, but if it's overused, I think it can become
yeah.
the shadow side of itself. And
Yeah.
so I think that was my strategy when I was younger, and then I held on to it and got older and realized like, oh, this doesn't really serve me so
Yeah.
now.
And what, like, why did you feel like you didn't sort of belong or fit in? Like, what was that about?
I mean, I moved a lot as a kid, so I think that's probably a
Mm,
part of it.
yeah.
And then, middle school and high school can be rough. So like, and I
Mhm.
wasn't super confident or like okay in my skin. And so I think that just, it got compoundingly harder. And
Yeah.
then,
Yeah. Mm,
yeah, I would say that's probably like just kind of, that was sort of the trajectory.
yeah. Yeah, so it feels like, because we talk a lot, while mom, about coping and like ways that we cope. And sometimes we learn to adapt, we learn to cope to survive. And we take that into adulthood without actually ever looking back at where did that even start and why. Because even if that's not the same circumstance I'm in, I'm still perpetuating these ways of being, even though my whole kind of life and circumstance has changed. And
Yeah.
so a lot of times we don't go back to reassess whether or not these coping mechanisms and adaptations that we've evolved with are actually relevant anymore or serve us anymore. And so that's a big part of the whole facing your reality part of the program, of just like really assessing, like, what am I actually keeping and what still serves me versus
Mhm.
what needs to go away. And it feels like you've come to a point where, like, yeah, maybe that did serve you for a while and it got you here, but like, based on where you're going with trying to be and with trying to like be yourself and be in your own skin, these kind of adaptations and coping mechanisms don't necessarily need to look the way that they have always looked. And I do agree that like being able to adapt, be a part of a team, like, you know, because I feel like what happens is like with you, you're able to listen really well. You're able to observe really well. You're able to like understand kind of like the communities that you're in or the organizations that you're in, and kind of have that systems mind to understand the inner workings of things and how to move it forward. So I think that has served you really well. But then if you also don't have your clear place and role and voice in it, then it's almost like you become kind of like a, a worker of it, or just like you kind of become chained to that, rather than being also a whole being and person, and um, like an important piece of the puzzle, rather than kind of like an invisible like magic maker, if that makes sense. So it feels like you have, or maybe are just coming to a place of deeper questioning around the way that you've adapted or coped, and sort of shifting how you show up, in a way that maybe feels more whole, because I feel like as we move through life and we keep these adaptations and these coping mechanisms, the universe gives us feedback. And it's like, oh, wait a minute. I don't actually like the feedback I'm getting. I don't actually like how I feel. I don't like these interactions that I'm having with people. This doesn't feel right. And that's what kind of informs the change of like, okay, I want to feel better in my skin, and the way that I'm showing up right now and the reactions I'm getting or the feedback I'm getting from the universe, it's not aligning to what I feel like I want in my life, or where I feel like I'm going, or who I feel like I genuinely am. And then that sometimes is that impetus for change. So yeah, feels like you sort of have come into that, and have been for the last years now. Um, does that resonate? Does that align?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. As you opt, as you opt, yeah. No, I think, yeah, I think I do tend to observe. I tend to be very in my head, and
Mm,
it can be great. I love being a neutral facilitator. I love being a coach because it's all outside of,
mm,
um and I think I do. I mean, I gravitate, like, those are roles I love to play, and I've
mm.
practiced them well over time. But I also think, like, part of my journey is like intentionally designed. Like, I think part of observing is like, is this safe? What's happening here?
Mm,
Like, how do I
mm,
curate, like,
mm.
making it through situations and um, environments? And now realizing, like, well, part of creating the life I want is naming, like, what environment I want that to
Yeah.
be, who I want to be a part of it, and how, like, and so
Mm,
you can't be a neutral, like, you can't be a neutral facilitator if you're also trying to design the life that you
yes.
want. And so just the balance of, I think both have their place. Um,
Yeah.
but being more intentional about designing my life and not adapting to whatever comes up or wherever I find myself.
Yeah, I love that. And that's like a great segue, because I did want to ask you about your dreams and just like where do you feel like you are going, and like, yeah, like what is the life that you're designing? Because I think so much of, being a mother is often, again, like serving everyone else and always thinking about everyone else, and designing life for our children, right? Designing life for others, or, the workplace that we're in. But there's not often a lot of space to intentionally design the life that we want and center what it is that we want. And so I'm really curious, like, what is that life that you're intentionally designing, given what you're talking about of really trying to do a lot less doing and more being. Like, what is that what does that look like for you?
Probably need to rewrite my I think my perfect day actually still aligns when I think about it. But I think
Mm,
I'm not there yet, but um I want to live more in community. I know that's something that I've
mm,
been realizing more and more is like
yeah.
what, and I don't know yet like what that means
Mhm.
exactly, but I remember like in my perfect day, I think there was something about like music and community, like,
Yeah.
and not necessarily being a fixed community, but like kind of a, yeah, the community of people supporting each other on their, we should
Yeah.
have a wild mama commune. That's what I think
There you
we
go.
need.
I need to buy some land.
Um, but yeah, so being in community, I think is something that I'm working on,
Mm,
which involves being vulnerable about like wanting to be in, right? Like, so like that's
totally.
some
Naming
of
it.
the pieces that I'm working on. And then being in nature is really important to me.
Mm,
And I've been realizing like I could also like do small things like to make my house more the space that I want it to be. Like I haven't
yeah.
been intentional about it. And so
Mm,
starting to do more of that. I'm thinking about like work wise, like what is, I know I love code, like how do I start to think about work differently? I think right now,
mm,
um, it's like a like I'm in a leadership role. It's a lot of, it can feel like a lot of pressure. Maybe it's not, but it feels
mm,
that way.
yeah,
And
totally.
very fast paced. And I don't know if it's that I want a slower pace. I wonder if I'd get bored. Like I want to be challenged, but I also want to have
Mm,
space for balance. And
yeah.
so part of me has been thinking a lot about, is it the job or is it me? And I'm not sure,
Mm,
right? Like where maybe it's both. Maybe I'm like drawn to high, like, because I think every job I've had has felt like high pressure, but is it the
yeah.
job? Is it me? Am I drawn to things that tend to be all consuming? Because if you're all
Mm,
focused on something, you don't have to worry about all the things to do when, internally. Um,
yeah.
but yeah, just wanting to,
Mm,
I don't want to feel like I'm always telling people, like, I don't want people to think I'm too busy. And I think people say that a lot
mm,
to me. And I think that's
mm,
pretty loud feedback, right? Like, I know you're busy, but, or I know like you don't have
mm,
time, but I don't want that to be, I don't want to live in a way that that makes that the impression that people have. And I think
yeah,
busy can be valued a lot, but it's not necessarily effective. And so just doing some
totally.
thinking, because I'm a very busy person, and
Mm.
I'm wondering about that more and more.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think about that a lot because I don't like associating myself with being busy. I hate when I say I feel busy. So I've been trying to say like my life is very full right now. Because busy feels reactive to me. Busy doesn't
Mhm.
feel intentional. Like, and I feel like everything I'm doing in my life right now is very intentional. Like it is a lot. Everything I'm doing, especially this year, I have a lot just feeling like it wants to be born, all of this fire blazing. And so it does make my time feel very full. But I do feel like I'm also being really intentional about how I'm using my time. And I make sure that I still am able to go to the beach in the mornings, even if it's for 5 minutes, or I'm still able to, spend 2 hours on the beach in the afternoon, during the week, or, so it's not perfect and I do want to get a little bit more efficient, but I don't like busy, that idea of busy, because it doesn't always feel purposeful to me. And I really want and need to feel purposeful in my life. So I really resonate with that and thinking about,
Mhm.
is it the job or is it me? Like I do wonder that, like, if it's all jobs that are like this, like, do all it feels like a lot of mamas I talk to, they all feel like this. They're just like, I don't know if you can have balance and have a full-time job. Like, is that actually possible? Because as much as companies want to say that they give balance and that they, provide that work-life balance and they want everyone to be well, the experiences I feel like most of us are having is not that. So, I do sometimes wonder, like you're saying, is it the job, or is it me? Is it just this society? But that's where I think the intentional life design is really important, because I don't think we can lead from the job. We have to lead from the design of our life and the components that we want, and then we set boundaries with the job. Is kind of what I think. And we have to like leverage these jobs to, help create the dreams that we want. But I think so much of, our orientation as mothers is we tend to prioritize the job. That's the focal point. And I think that's where we, it gets really out of balance. But I really resonate with a lot of what you just said, like the ideal kind of life design and the busyness and shifting that.
I really resonate with you. The shift to the word full
Mm,
feels really different, because a lot of the things that I say I'm busy with are not the same things I would say my life is full about. And
mm.
so it's interesting, like that one word feels like a pretty big shift in terms of what
Mm.
you're filling your life with.
Yeah. 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 And it kind of is that whole concept of being whole, right? Like feeling whole is so different. It encompasses so much more, just like fullness, that like what I think of when I think of living whole, or when I think of having a full life, it is very different than I'm just fucking busy. It's just like,
Yeah.
I just have to do all these things. I feel anxious and I feel overwhelmed and I never feel like I can breathe. And I like all these things. Like, I don't want that. And so, yeah, leading with fullness and wholeness feels like, okay, I'm in control of my life and like I'm deciding how this is going to go. And if the job that I have cannot support that, then I need to work towards shifting that, because being in that space is more important than me working some job. And I think that for me, that's been an important shift in my own life, not feeling like I'm beholden to a job, but feeling like I'm more accountable to my values and my vision and my whole self,
Mhm.
than a workplace. And that sometimes can feel scary, like, but it mostly feels empowering, to me. So yeah. I want to give you space to like ask questions also, because we talked about this being a dialogue and we've had some, but I'm happy to let you kind of ask whatever questions you have of me.
Yeah, I am. I'm curious. So it sounds like this is your first foray into your podcast. That feels
Yeah.
kind of huge. And I'm kind of curious what catalyzed
Mm.
this.
Yeah. So earlier this year, I decided to, kind of launch the podcast. I think it was in May. And I had these ideas of doing it before, because what I was feeling is like I have struggled in the past years to like fully allow myself to just express myself. Just let it out, because my conditioning and my trauma tells me that if I fully express myself, I will inevitably be attacked. At some point I will be attacked, or I will be judged, or I will be misunderstood, or I'll be misconceived, all of these things, and that attack is going to hurt me, and I don't want to be hurt. Similar to what we were talking about, right? So I have moments of where I just fully express myself, but then my body, my mind kind of like panics and like, oh no, Tiff, let's go back into the cave. That was too much. That, you might offend someone, or you might whatever it is, like all of these things would go in my head that would keep me blocked. And so over the last couple of years, I've really been trying to free myself from these blocks so that I can express. And part of some of the block is being on video, even though right now we're on video. This idea of being on video, excuse me, like kind of feels like I have to always be presentable, right? When sometimes I just want to authentically engage with people and not give a fuck about what I look like, not care what other people are going to say I look like. And so the podcast originally was just like this idea of just having audio and just like, okay, I just want to be in the pockets of my mamas and talk about the real and the raw and the things that I know mamas are struggling with every day. And like, I don't feel like anybody's talking about, no one's addressing the day-to-day inner workings and challenges that mamas are facing. And so my idea with the whole podcast was like, okay, if I can just literally voice memo this podcast and talk to an issue or struggle that mamas are having, I feel like that would be valuable. Like that was the the sort of impetus and goal. Fast forward like a couple months though, I'm like, okay, but so much a part of this journey is not only me speaking to, these issues, but hearing from real mamas and being able to speak to you all in this kind of conversational dialogue. And I feel like a lot of what's coming up for me this year is like, I really want to help shift the narrative. I really want to help show that there are other examples of motherhood that, yeah, that we are all struggling with similar things, and we don't have to be isolated, we don't have to be quiet, we don't have to settle for this BS of what we're sold is motherhood, because there's so much more to us as mothers. And I really truly believe that mothers healing, coming into their dreams, their potential is so powerful and necessary for the healing and possibility we create for the next 7 generations. And so I was like, all right, Tiff, we could either keep hiding, not intentionally necessarily, but kind of out of my own wounds, right? We can keep hiding a little bit and, whatnot, or we can just have these conversations and we can allow ourselves to be seen, and we can be a part of shifting this story and bringing more of these stories to light, because I know so many incredible mamas who have deep struggles but also are super talented, you being one of them. You have very real challenges just like me, but you also have very real dreams, ambitions, desires, like goals, and you really care. Like you really care about how this life goes, like for you, for your son, for others, for the community that you want to be a part of, for the work that you do, for Wow Mama and this community that we're building. So it's like, I want more of our voices to be heard. And so I felt like, okay, well, I just need to then get out of my comfort zone or move through my fears and just start having these conversations, because I know that there's other mamas who are going to resonate with some of the things that you talked about, some of the things that we've talked about together. And so I think sometimes it's like when you're greater, like, how we talk about like when your personality meets the energy of your soul, like that's authentic empowerment from the seat of the soul. It's like, okay, personality, like the energy of my soul is telling me like, it's time, Tiff, it's time to lead the way. It's time to keep, blazing this trail. It's time to step into what and I've had to kind of get my personality and my, just all of me to follow that. But I feel like I'm really being led by a deeper sort of mission or purpose, or just the energy of, just the energy of my soul is like, this is what wants to happen. And I'm like, okay. So, it's kind of scary, but it's also amazing, because when we think about my essence, right, like my core essence, I'm fire. Like I'm very much fire, and I'm also a visionary. I'm a seer. Like, so, it serves me, similar to what you were saying earlier, it serves me to step into this. Like it serves me and it serves everyone to step more into who I actually am, rather than kind of, altering myself out of fear or whatnot. And so I feel like I've done a lot of work on myself to get to a point where I feel like, okay, I think I can do this. So that's the impetus for these conversations. And but as you can see, I've had to move through a lot of my inner stuff to get to this point. Like it didn't happen overnight. So yeah.
I wonder, because you are a fiery visionary, and
Yeah.
I think a lot of what you share resonates with me, and
Mm,
you're an amazing coach, both like in
mm,
the group setting and the individual setting, and you have a way of kind of seeing to the heart of
mm.
what people are sharing.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think can come from having so much inside that it's
Yeah.
easier to not judge because you're like holding
Yeah.
everything from your journey. I'm curious, like what it's been like for you, or how have you shifted kind of this gift that you offer to the wild mama community in terms of like
Mm.
offering it to yourself?
Oh, like this gift of like kind of the getting to the heart.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I think the only reason why I can offer it to Wild Mama is because I've had to do it on myself for so many years before I got to it. And I think I've made a commitment to myself that I will never tell y'all to do something that I'm not doing myself. So the more I come into the work of serving and coaching and leading, the more I have to be accountable to myself and practicing the things that I'm teaching and sharing, and because it feels really inauthentic and also very dangerous actually. So this is the piece where like, I was in a cult at 16, and was brainwashed, and through that whole experience I learned the danger of taking advantage of people's vulnerabilities
Mm-hmm.
and the danger of trying to save and help without doing your own work,
Mm-hmm.
right? To position yourself as a healer, to position yourself as a, you know, in the church that I used to be in, they called it a shepherd. And you're the sheep. I'm the shepherd, you're the sheep, right? So like this idea that like you can lead people or help people come to God or whatever, but never do your own work. And I was on the receiving end of how incredibly harmful that is, and
Mm-hmm.
how incredibly dangerous that is for a 16-year-old who became a 20-year-old who you then arranged their marriage. That's crazy, right? So I think I've experienced firsthand uh how vulnerable we are when we're in our wounds and when we have pain and when we're really navigating complex life, and how we can easily be preyed upon. And so I have always had a commitment to myself and to, I feel like, my ancestors, to guides, and to just humanity, that if I'm going to step into this work, I will always do my work first,
Mm-hmm.
because I cannot help you or anyone else if I don't do my work first. And I never, ever, ever want to be in a position where I'm taking advantage of people's vulnerabilities. Because as you well know through the cohort, the mamas that come in are in incredibly vulnerable places. Even if they've accomplished a lot in their life, they're in very like open and broken and just like confusing spaces and places. And I've seen people take advantage of that, coaches who take advantage of that and then don't actually help, don't actually serve, like just take the money and run. Like I don't ever want to do that. I genuinely want to create change. I genuinely want to, help mamas heal. I genuinely want to make this world better, but I know that I cannot do that unless I do that for myself. So everything that I'm able to do for you all is because I do it for myself first. That's the only reason why I understand the inner workings of the struggles that y'all have, and I can see it. It's because I've done it. Like I've been there into the depths of my own being And that was a part of my healing process. So I just continue to come back to that as I step more into these roles and own more of my power and my gifts. The more I have to come into myself. And my ancestors told me, like, a few years ago, Tiff, the more that you come out into the world and are seen, the deeper you must go into the forest. Right. So it's that balance that I always have to strive for. And it's like an oak tree. I want to be a huge oak tree, but I can't be a huge oak tree if my roots are not deep. Like, if I got some shallow ass roots, I'm not going to grow. And if I grow, I'm going to fall over. I don't want to do that. Right. So I am always trying to find the balance of rooting very deeply so that I can grow in a strong, authentic way that's going to last. Sustainability is very important to me in this line of work because I want to be doing this for a long time. And I want Wild Mama to be beyond me. Like, so.
What's interesting is that you reference an oak tree, and oak trees like weave their roots together underground, so they're all holding each other up, which I feel like is very symbolic with Wild Mama, because it's not just you, but it's also the community that gets built, and it's the cohorts, and then the cohorts coming together. And so when you were talking about the oak tree, I was just thinking about like how it's actually many oak trees all intertwining underground, holding each other up.
And that's so important for me because I want y'all to be whole, because I want to be whole. And when we're whole, we can hold each other underground in a way that we actually can build something real, right? Like, this isn't like for fake, like, this is for real, for real. And so that's why I'm so gung-ho about the real transformation that all my mamas experience, and why it means a lot to me, and why I'm willing to grow slow, because I want to ensure that the transformations are real. Because if the transformations are real, then we really do start to build this full oak forest, this community of mamas who feel more rooted and whole in themselves. That's generations. Like, each of us have like 1 to 2 kids at least. That's all those generations are being impacted by us healing. I can't do all of this on my own. I don't want to do all this on my own. Right. But we have to do our inner work first. We have to heal. But generations and generations of children and descendants are literally being impacted now because of the work that we're committed to doing. So I'm just like really about it, and I feel like the mamas that come into the program are also really about it. And we're dedicated. And I think that's why we're able to stay connected for years, because it's like so much of this journey happens after the program. Like, the transformation is inside, but then it's the practice. And that's what I'm really about, is like, how are we actually living? How are we staying committed to the dream and the journey and the ideal lifestyle that we want, so that we can be whole, so we can be here for a while, so we can change the trajectory of like our lives, our children's lives in the next 7 generations. Like, it's a big vision, but it's one that I believe that we can actually begin to realize in our lifetime.
Yeah. And it's interesting because healing's a journey too. Like, there's not a check done.
No.
And having the tool, I think what's really powerful with kind of the gift you've built is the tools that you can always come back to. So like, okay, in a different place, different struggle, let me come back to the tools. Let me rework the pieces. Let me figure out what I need right now, because healing, like all of the things, right? Like they're forever. And then it's assess, okay, where am I now? What's happening now? What's coming up for me? And you can start to recognize the triggers and the symbols and know which medicines to like run back for when you come up against it again.
Oh, I love that. And that's why I think, aligning everything back to Grandmother Earth, Mother Nature, is she's so complex, right? Like, Earth like is so diverse in experience, that when we can align to that, I feel like it creates the space for like our lives to wander, but it's still relevant, right? Like, and that's why I wanted to create something and tools that felt like they were more universal and more like rooted no matter where you're at in your journey or what you're experiencing or the chaos that you're facing, like it's still relevant. And that's what I think the power of like aligning to the seasons and the directions does for us. So yeah. Any other questions or things you want to discuss or share?
Yeah, I'm curious for you, what's your vision now?
What's my vision now? That's such a big question. Like, do you mean for just my life, or do you mean like with Wild Mama, or which one, or both?
Both.
They're kind of intertwined, so I can't actually speak about one without the other.
Tiff, can I pause for 1 second?
Yes, of course.
Sorry, I'll be right back.
All good, all good. Yeah, all good. No worries. Okay, so my vision. I have a really big vision, Kim. Um, it's massive. Right now, what's been coming through this year, it's like there's the immediate kind of what I feel like I need to focus on in the next year, but then there's the big, right? So the big is that I essentially want to create like an ecosystem of businesses that all are in service of the needs of mamas, right? And I really want to create an ecosystem that is generative and that the businesses fuel and support each other. And it's more cyclical and reflective of nature. And, like we're talking about the roots of the oak trees, like each business is like its own oak tree that serves a particular need in our space. And they fuel each other and they feed each other. So some of the things that I want to do outside of just Wild Mama, the program, I want to build more and center more community space. So I plan on like creating a online community space where we can practice aligning to the seasons, on this rhythmic basis, but in community with others as a way to like intentionally unlearn martyrdom, motherhood. Because it's one thing to say like, I don't want to be a martyr, I don't want to keep sacrificing myself, I want to be whole. And how do you actually do that? Like, what does that actually look like? How do you unlearn all of this shit? And so, yes, the program is like one way that we kind of do that. But then again, there's that practice of the day to day and how do we show up? So I really want to center more community space. And so, outside of the retreat that I'll be doing, next year, I'm planning to have like a live version of these kinds of conversations where locally I'm starting to build more community here in Hawaii, and I can have more kind of just raw conversations, but make it an event, make it a community gathering, make it a space where mamas can come, where we can showcase mamas, in music and in art, and vendors, who are mamas, to sell their stuff, but we can center in the conversation, right? So we'll have the conversation, but it'll be a community gathering. And that feels really important to me, like centering more in the community piece, in all of this. So, there's Wild Mama, and then I really want to, again, like have these other businesses like a arts and entertainment side of the business where we can do eventually like docuseries and having these kinds of conversations, but like produced in funner ways. And then I really want to have an institute. I really want to have an institute that centers research on mamas. Think Brené Brown. Like to bring more of the language, to bring more of the words, but also to then fuel the work, right? Because the more that we can understand the reality of what mamas are experiencing, the more we can tell different stories, right? The more that we can create programming or support to actually serve mamas. Because eventually I want Wow Mama to be so grand that I can fund and invest in mamas' ideas, and I can, make it a space where we can actually, give to mamas in a way that supports them. And like one of my ultimate dreams is I'm learning real estate, but I would love to learn real estate development and create communities that are centered on the needs of mamas. Like who's actually doing that? Who actually cares about that? But wouldn't that be amazing to like think about us as mamas and what we really need? And you even talking about community and needing that space. Like, what if communities were designed with that
Mm,
in mind? Like, so those are some of the like big visions that I have, but I want to build a massive sort of ecosystem, but I want every single oak tree to stand on its own. I want every business to have its own purpose and stand on its own and be healthy. But that if one is, not doing as well, the others can hold it. Like I don't want to build one massive company. Like I
mm.
want an ecosystem, and that for me is a more living and breathing reflection of how grandmother earth actually works. So yeah, that's the vision. While I surf and while I find land
Yeah.
and build my dream home and like all these things, but I'm still at such the beginning of this journey, but um yeah, I just really want to transform lots of mama's lives, and I really want folks to like for Wow Mama to be the go-to. Like when mama's, when you think of a mama and her dreams or what she needs or support, you think of Wow Mama, like books. I want to write books, like write a memoir, like all kinds of stuff. Like
Yeah.
it's like I'm 38, but it feels like my life is kind of just starting in many ways.
That's kind of beautiful.
Yeah.
The new blossoms on your oak tree.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And it just keeps evolving and winding, but um for me it's a partnership with the universe and my ancestors and like how it all comes to be. So it's very much yeah, like a mutual exchange in terms of how the vision emerges. Like it's not Tiff and my ego. It's like it's just yeah, I don't know how to explain that, but it's a
You,
partnership.
yeah. Well, and you've talked a lot about like being open to like letting the, I don't know, energy, life, whatever you call it, like
Yeah.
flow through you. And so like the more in alignment you are, the more open you are to receiving what
Yeah.
the universe is sharing.
Yeah. Yep. Because I think it comes both out of me and through me, if that makes
Mhm.
sense. Like it's like both. Like I have my own kind of dreams and visions and fire and, desires that feel like they exist in me already. They're like in my DNA and in my bones. But then there's like kind of like this channel that happens that then comes through, and they both kind of come together to create
Mm.
this incredible vision. And sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, like oh but yeah, I just trust it and just keep showing up every day.
Pretty powerful.
Yeah, yeah, it yeah, it is. It's powerful, and it's fun. It's really exciting. But I really have to like pace myself and stay aligned to my values, stay aligned to, you know, what I know I need to stay whole, because I'm still just a human being. So I would say a big part of the vision right now is building a team, building enough capital to be able to have a team, even if they're like part time, but good at what they do. So a big part is like, I don't want to build this alone. I really want to have a fabulous team. So part of the vision is like putting those key components in place as well as people in place to be able to do it in a sustainable way, because I do want to enjoy my life. I don't want to work all the time. I don't want to
Yeah.
be a workaholic, but I am in a very important moment right now, where things are really being born and coming through, and um, the resources are showing up in odd ways, but it's showing up in order to realize some of these visions.
When you were talking about investing in other, like in mama's ideas and stuff, I was thinking about in Sierra Leone, we did a like village savings and loans association with women,
Mm,
but
mm,
like instead of the traditional model of like we all give all of our money to TIFF this week and then they
yeah.
put it in, and then when they reached a certain amount they would start loaning to themselves. So they would come
Mm,
with an idea, then it had to get approved by the group, and then they'd get the loan and then they'd pay it back to the group, and so that at the end of the year they would like get their money back with interest that they've all both
wow.
like paid in but also like loaned out to each other. So it was like a self generating, like
Yeah.
growing fund that was supporting the group's business ideas.
I love that because a big part of what I'm doing right now is just learning, like reading and trying to understand, how money works, but also alternative forms of,
Mhm.
you know, creating and building capital. Because I really don't want to have to constantly rely on other people's money. And that's what you're told is how to grow. Oh, you just need to raise capital. You need to do, and I'm just like, I want to have a sustainable ecosystem in business where I can leverage other people's money, but I don't need other people's money. Like that's an important
Yeah.
piece to me. And like, how do you do that in a capitalistic society? I don't know. But that's part of like the visioning and the pacing is like education, educating myself. But also again, being open because sometimes when you're creating something new that doesn't exist, like that also means that the answers aren't out there either. So I have to tune in and tap in to the greater source to get ideas that, you know, maybe haven't fully been realized yet in this life. And that's a big part of, I guess, the kind of spiritual aspect of all of it for me is, listening for other alternative ways. That I think our ancestors were so wise and intelligent and um, they probably had something, so I just kind of need to tune in and listen to see like, there's this phrase like uncovering erased wisdom. Like that's kind of what I feel like sometimes I'm
Mm,
doing is like the wisdom is there. It's just, through colonization and oppression and all these things, it's been erased, it's been suppressed, it's been hidden. But when we can kind of like align to ourselves and tune into who we truly are, it's in our DNA. It's in our bodies.
mm,
So how can I just like tap in, tune in, and uncover that wisdom that already exists? So that's a big part of it for me is the listening and the trusting, versus like the pressure to like, I got to figure this out. Tiff has to figure this out. It's like, no, I'm very much supported. And it's more than just me. And I think that's also the beauty of creating a team and sharing ideas like in this conversation. It's like, oh, I can learn and I can um, gain from the wisdom and knowledge of other people who might know something different than me. And then together we can create something that's in alignment with the greater vision. But it requires like an openness and a um, humility, um, but also still asserting the vision,
mm.
like being very clear about where we're going. So yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, beautiful.
um, Amazing. This is so awesome. I'm wondering if you have any kind of final words or thoughts that you'd like to share. This has been like a really lovely conversation, and I feel like I learned a lot about even more about you, and it was awesome to just talk to just engage in this way. But do you have any like final words or takeaways or thoughts or questions?
Yeah, I mean, I always love connecting with you. And I think, yeah, I think just the realization, like being in dialogue, being in conversation is like I feel more energized now than when we started. So, you
Yeah.
know, just
Yes.
kind of celebrating the energy that comes from connecting and
Yeah.
getting to share kind of more about our journeys and where they're headed and what, what we're visioning for them.
Yeah, and I feel like that's the beauty of the being versus the doing, right? Like,
Mm,
yes, we're doing this or having a conversation, but I feel like when we can just kind of slow down and be present to each other and um, you know, come with a intention of like just learning and listening and connecting, so much comes from that. More than when we're just like forcing our way constantly.
mhm,
And I think that that is so much of what we don't often talk about when it comes to like creating and manifesting and making things happen in life is how much just like relaxing and quiet is a part of generating new ideas. And so being able to just be in a relaxed conversation like this, it's like, oh wow, actually a lot can come from that. And there's so much value in that. And I think so many folks feel so isolated right now, especially mamas, like
mhm.
feel so disconnected, so isolated. And a lot of it isn't that we're not around people. We're often around people a lot, but we're not connecting with people. We're not talking about the things that we actually care about. Um, and so I'm hoping that these conversations bring more of that, like connection and conversation, and hopefully the in-person community events, and then eventually tour in the US and around and have these real conversations in different places. Like I think that would be so fun. Um,
Yeah. I
so
hear you like tapping it, like the person behind the mother. And that
yes,
mother is a role that we play, but not all of who
we
we are.
are.
And
Yes.
when you don't celebrate all the pieces that make you you, then you're just moving through the motions of the roles that you play or the way the world views you.
Yes, Kim. Yes. And I think that's what matters. Like that's why these conversations are so important because there's so much to you beyond, oh, how's your son? Oh, like how's work? Like, like you have such complex thinking, right? Like there's so much to you. So that was really, really well said. And that's the point of it is to really highlight, yeah, your core essence, who you truly are. See you, have you be seen so that you can continue to know that you matter. Like, because we all matter. And I think mamas don't get that enough. Like knowing that we matter beyond what we're doing for everyone else. So yay. Thank you for this.
Thank you.
This was great. Great way to start and kick off. I'm so excited and yeah, really appreciate you and really appreciate your time. This was awesome.
Likewise.
More to come.
Yeah, I can't wait to tune in.
I know, me too. I have some other conversations lined up, so I'm excited and no idea when these will be released, but I will let you know.
You've already got a fan base.
Yay. Thank you, Kim. Have a lovely
Thank
rest of
you.
your
You
weekend.
too.
We'll talk soon. Bye.
Bye.